Welcome to After the Storm, Stormwater in Vermont. You know, in thinking about this show, I haven't given a lot of thought about where stormwater goes. I'm wondering if you have. You probably think that stormwater and water runoff in general just goes away, and you don't have to think about it. But there's a lot of effect and impact on the environment, and that's what this show is all about. Joining me on this show, we have Jim Pease from the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. We also have Julie Beth Hines from the City of South Burlington, the Director of Planning and Zoning. Also joining us, Dr. Mary Watson, Director of the Rubenstein Ecosystem Science Laboratory at the University of Vermont, and Jim Jutras from the Village of Essex Junction, Director of Public Works and Wastewater Treatment. Before we get into our panel discussion, we want to give you a background about what we're talking about. So don't go away. Watch this backgrounder that we have for you, which will give you some good information about the issue that we're discussing today.
Rain, rain, rain. Have you ever wondered where all the water goes when it rains or after the snow melts? In open fields or deep woods, some of it may seep into the ground or evaporate. But we don't have as many open fields or deep woods as we used to in Chittenden County. Instead, we have homes and businesses and lots of driveways and roads and parking lots. Water can't be absorbed by hard surfaces like driveways and roads, so most rain and snow melt runs off over our driveways and parking lots, runs down our roads, runs off until it reaches a storm drain or one of our streams. The storm drains and the streams carry the rain and snow melt until eventually it's all dumped untreated into Lake Champlain. This runoff water is called stormwater. The problem is, as it flows over the land, stormwater picks up and carries pollutants into our streams and then into the lake. Stormwater picks up pollutants found in fertilizers and pesticides, bacteria from pet wastes, and oil and grease from cars. Stormwater picks up litter and loose dirt and sediment, and it carries these too. This polluted stormwater enters the lake directly or through storm drains that lead to waterways that empty directly into the lake. Every home in Chittenden County is in a watershed that drains to Lake Champlain. That means stormwater runoff is important to all of us. Our waterways are important to all of us, not just for swimming or fishing or boating or other pleasures. Our waterways are also important for the drinking water we all rely on every day. Whether you have your own water system or use a local municipal system, it's just common sense that it takes more work and it costs more money to clean up dirty water than it does to treat basically clean water. Because polluted stormwater runoff has become a major problem in Chittenden County, a new campaign, Smart Waterways, has been started. And because every home in Chittenden County is in a watershed that drains to Lake Champlain, we all play a role. To find out what you can do to protect our waterways and Lake Champlain, visit smartwaterways.org.
That should give us a good background on what we're talking about, but we also want to frame up the definition of all the water that can affect the stormwater drainage system. And Julie Beth Hines from South Burlington, it's not just the rainstorm or the melt, it's our hosing down the cars and it's washing down the driveways. So there's more water that's affecting the whole stormwater system.
That's right. Any water that gets into the storm drain system can carry pollutants. The storm drainage system is really designed only for rain, and when we introduce other pollutants or other materials, things that run off when we wash our cars in our driveways, anything that's captured when we hose down a driveway to clean it off, that also gets into the system and tends to carry a great deal of pollution with it. So what we're talking about in stormwater education is really understanding the role of the stormwater system, how rainstorms affect it, but also how anything else we introduce into that system really can affect our surface waters.
And so all of us watching the show today have quite an impact on the whole system, depending on how we carry out our lives. And today we hope to find out how we can do a little bit better in terms of having less of an impact in a negative way on the system.
That's right.
So let's start with Jim Pease from the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, who's with the Water Quality Division of the Stormwater Management Section. Jim, there's a lot going on at the state level. What's happening in Vermont right now?
Well, basically, this program is an outgrowth of the federal Phase 2 stormwater program that was authorized under the Clean Water Act amendments in 1987. That program required larger municipalities, initially Chicago, San Francisco, to start to address stormwater runoff. In 1999, the Congress authorized Phase 2 of that program, which requires municipalities of about 100,000 or greater to also start to address stormwater runoff as being the principal cause of our nation's waters. In Vermont, that program applies to just the greater Burlington area. The area is brought a map to show you, but the area is delineated around the Burlington area. It is defined by the Census Bureau data, and that's the basis for the regulation. The state of Vermont, as a delegated authority, administers the federal Phase 2 program and expanded it to include some of the watersheds in the state that are impaired for stormwater. So we went a little bit beyond what the federal requirements were in order to get a better administer a better program that would address the stormwater issues in the state.
And throughout all of this, as we learn about this program, there's a lot that we can do on the individual household level to help improve the quality of our water runoff. Dr. Mary Watson, who is the director of the Rubenstein Ecosystem Science Laboratory at the University of Vermont, is with us today. And let's talk a bit about UVM's role in terms of research and all of the work that's being done here in the state.
Sure, I'd love to do that. We're doing a lot of work in a couple of different areas. One of the things we do is we go out and we take samples of stormwater. We want to understand what actually is in stormwater, so we go out and put a bottle under the flow, catch it, and look at what's in it. And what we see is that almost anything you can imagine is in it. In the spring, when people are fertilizing their lawns and gardens, we find fertilizer and we find pesticides in the runoff. We find pet waste, nutrients. We can't identify it as pet waste, but we find nutrients in runoff anytime we collect it. And that tells us that when people aren't fertilizing, nutrients are coming from other sources, and pet waste is one of those potential sources. We find bacteria as well from pet waste. That bacteria can interfere with our good recreational fun at the water's edge, because there's too much bacteria. You can get sick if you swallow some of that water. We find other toxic contaminants in stormwater runoff as well. You may have heard of things like nickel and zinc and lead and mercury. All of those things we can detect in stormwater some of the time. Another really common thing we see is sediment. Any kind of particle that's on a paved surface gets washed off and goes with the stormwater. And one of the really interesting things when we look at the streams themselves, a lot of our stormwater doesn't go directly to the lake. Some of it goes directly to the lake, but a lot of it goes to a stream first. And when it rains and the rain falls on these hard surfaces, it rushes all at once into the stream, and it carries that sediment with us. With it, with us too. But it goes right into the stream, and that very powerful flush of water changes the way the stream functions. We see banks that are carving in and being undercut. We see channels that are carving down lower into the stream. We see sandbars appearing where there were no sandbars before. And that's the stream trying to adjust to this slug of stormwater that's coming in. And we know those changes in stream channel are really behind a lot of the losses of biological integrity. Now there's a big word for you. Yeah. But the loss of the fishes and the little bugs and other things that use the stream. So what we're trying to do is figure out which kinds of channel changes that come from stormwater are most detrimental to the things that make their home in the stream, and also to understand which pollutants in stormwater are our greatest problem. And there we really think that the nutrients, the phosphorus that's going down to Lake Champlain, which stimulates the algae bloom, and the bacteria are the two biggest things that we worry about. We see other things, but those two are big.
When you talk about phosphorus, how can people who are watching at home identify how they might be contributing to that? What might they be doing that would be adding to the phosphorus?
Sure. Unfortunately, phosphorus is in very many things, but a couple of the primary offenders are pet waste and fertilizer. So if you think about fertilizer, and especially this time of year, everybody's getting ready to get their lawn boy spreader out and to go walk their paces back and forth across their yard. And when you do that and you go onto your driveway and you turn around on your driveway and then you start off on your grass again, you leave this little trail of fertilizer on your driveway. And when it rains, that goes directly into the storm drain system. The fertilizer that you put on your grass goes down into the soil, and soil particles are almost magical in their ability to absorb pollutants. So fertilizers that go on the grass, small sediment particles that go on the grass, a lot of that gets retained in the soil. But anything that goes on a hard surface is just going to get picked up by the water and taken down into the storm drain system. So that sounds like a minor thing, but it's a minor thing that can make a really big difference. Picking up after your pet, a lot of us don't worry so much about that in the winter. The snow melts and we have all these little wonderful treasures left behind. Go get those before they get washed into the storm drain system.
These are great points. A lot of people may, again, not think that there's anything too detrimental about the lawn treasures that might be left over, but it's very important to clear that away. And somebody who's working in the municipal system is Jim Jutras, who's at the Village of Essex Junction and the Director of Public Works and Wastewater Treatment. You oversee the system. Tell us a bit about the effect that you see and what's happening at your level.
The effect on our side is system maintenance. That's basically our function. Systems were built and designed to perform a certain way, and our expectation is to maintain those standards of operation. They can easily handle what they were designed for. They cannot handle things they were not designed for. And everything we've been talking about today are things those systems were not intended to take for treatment or removal. Pet waste and otherwise, fertilizer, silt, sediment, that's normally occurring is fine. They are designed to handle that. Large amounts from washing off a muddy truck or something like that, the system is not designed to handle those finer systems. What we do is teach prevention first, which is part of our program and discussion here today. If we can keep it out of the system using the old saying, reduce, reuse, recycle, don't put it into the system. Use whatever it is, be it fertilizer or an herbicide or pesticide. Use it what it was intended for, and only use what you need. Then we can do our job better of maintaining the stormwater system, and we do that by street sweeping, cleaning catch basins, monitoring the inlets and discharges of systems to make sure we don't have large flows, as Dr. Watson described, creating an additional problem further downstream.
Now, in terms of the fertilizers, are there other choices that people can use that are more beneficial, if they're concerned about what's going into the lawn and what might be spilling over on the driveway?
You can always use an organic fertilizer, but the first line is to always determine whether you need a fertilizer or not. Sample the soil. You can get an inexpensive test kit or utilize different agricultural testing services throughout the region to find out whether you even need to fertilize or not. Similar to any nutrient, if you over-fertilize or you take too many vitamins, the system's not designed to handle it. Therefore, it just leaches out or washes out into the surface waters.
Let's turn to Julie Beth Hines, who's with the City of South Burlington, Director of Planning and Zoning. Julie Beth, programs such as this, how do they benefit South Burlington and I would imagine other communities that are facing the issues that we're talking about today?
Well, stormwater is an interesting one from a municipal standpoint because there's a lot that we can do with system maintenance that Jim was just describing, and with some of the Phase 2 requirements for good housekeeping of our municipal systems. But that's probably half the battle on really preventing stormwater pollution. The other half is personal behavior, and that's where it becomes very difficult for a municipality to get its arms around that impact. And that's why we need a program such as this, where we're in partnership with the state and our neighboring towns and the university to teach people about their impacts and about the simple strategies that they can do at home to reduce pollution, because there's a lot we can do on building stormwater ponds, on doing stream restoration, but the only way we can address that impact from every single person who lives in that municipality and uses that system is through public education.
Well, let's throw it wide open then, and let's talk about some of the most common areas that all of us will experience throughout the year. And one of the areas, let's go right to the pet waste, and we're gonna cover a few things. Washing the car, your pet at home, and also different kinds of maintenance that we might do around the house that somehow might filter down and get into the stormwater system. Let's talk about pet waste. Again, seems so innocent, and you're not taking the dog for a walk down the bike path. It's in your yard. That's your territory, your domain. Why should you have to clean that up? We'll start over here with Julie Beth, and we'll chime in as we go.
An issue near and dear to my heart every morning at 6:30. The big issue with pet waste is the amount of E. coli bacteria that are in every little treasure from your beloved pet. And when I walk Kirby down the street in the morning, if he decides to go on the curb or anywhere near a storm drain, and that little treasure ends up getting into the storm drain, someone kicks it there, they don't want it on their lawn, or or people put them there, or the rains come and it washes into the drain. That little treasure sits there and festers into literally millions of colony-forming units of E. coli. Then it gets washed down the drain system into the pond at the end of the neighborhood that's open. That's accessible to the same dogs, to your kids who might see something interesting, a frog or something living in there, and it's full of bacteria. Now, our standard in Vermont is 77 colony-forming units per 100 milliliters of water. That's what we consider safe. And you've got literally millions of those in every little dog treasure. It's essential that we all keep them out of the storm drain system,
so the
where
numbers,
we could come back into contact with that.
The numbers that are important, and sometimes when we throw around a lot of numbers, our eyes can glaze over and trying to match up those numbers. But what I heard you to say was 77 units versus millions. And I think just that spectrum right there alone is enough to, well, it scared me as you brought it up. But also, I think, too, it's important to mention not only the wash-off and the runoff, but people have to be careful about, some people are on wells or there's the water, the streams also feed other animals and things like that. Any other comments in terms of pet waste and issues that you think are important to bring up for folks to know?
One thing that we try to stress is just the personal responsibility, especially if your dog is not doing his action on your property, or if it's on municipal property. We can't be out there picking it up everywhere. So what we do in the dog licensing phase is give people something called the Bags on Board. It's a portable pet waste container that they can pick up after their pet. Very easy and convenient. And then dispose of that pet waste in the trash or at home in a toilet if that's what you choose to do. But we can't be everywhere at any one time. So what we're hoping to do is get the message across that we can all be a solution to this problem that we have in how we manage our waste. We have 2 dogs at home, and we pick up after them almost every day. Right. It's a regular thing, not just from the E. coli bacteria, but we have young kids, and you're out playing in the yard, and we've all had it happen when we were younger kids, stepping in it by accident, and that creates another health issue at home. So it's a good proactive practice that helps the environment as well.
I guess we could say that we need to get the duty. The duty is to get the duty in the toilet or the trash safely. And also, I would think it's a we were talking about behavior. As we walk around different neighborhoods or communities, there may be wide open areas or lots that aren't developed, or maybe a little woods or something like that. And the brain kind of goes to this psychological place like, oh, that's open space. That's like a little bit of a trash area. But it's not. It affects that eventually could get into the stormwater or the drainage system.
That's a really important point. We have one of those near where I live, and it is very interesting this time of year when you walk by it. You can tell by your nose what's accumulated there over the winter time. And those areas, that's a common resource, and we all kind of forget who don't even know who owns the land. But even our own backyard, that's our backyard, but what leaves our backyard then becomes part of the common property. And the waters are everybody's resource. And if you're not picking up in your own yard, it's going to leave your yard and go somewhere else. It has the potential to do that. And that's the reason why you do have to worry about your own yard. If you keep your kids out of the little treasures in your yard, but the rain takes those little treasures and then puts them into the stream, and that's everybody's resource there. So if we're going to protect everybody's resources, we all have to worry about our own backyard.
Right, and as you move around, and again, if there are open spaces or lots or woods near your house, we really need to think of them as we're moving along with our pets, that becomes our territory, our turf that we have jurisdiction over to make sure that we maintain it and keep it clean.
Rob, I think another connection is once that bacteria moves down that stream, it typically in Chittenden County ends up at a beach or near a beach, and the frequency of beach closures can be high some summers, and there's nothing worse than wanting to go swimming on a hot summer day and having had a rainfall the day before, the beach is closed. So there is a connection between your activity at home and your use of the lake and enjoyment of the lake.
And Jim, that's a good point, because what would you say, what would your comment be in terms of the more that we're able to control this on an individual level? Is there any way to translate that into how that might affect the amount of closings that we would have, announcements that we would have in a summer?
Well, I'm sure it would. It will over time. It is going to take time. We do have a beach in Burlington that's been permanently closed, Blanchard Beach, because it was they tested it every 2 or 3 days, and every 2 or 3 days it would either be opened or closed, and it became obvious that depending on the rain, the brook would either be bringing out high levels of bacteria, or it'd be be reasonably safe, but it was just very unpredictable. And the effort is to clean up that stream to allow the beach to be open up for a reasonable amount of time. There is a really interesting study that out in California where they found that the kinds of illnesses you'd get from stormwater and from E. coli, and Mary can probably comment much better on this, aren't the kinds of sicknesses you might think you would get. You get, ear infection or a sore throat. You might not relate that to the swimming, at the beach, it might, you might relate it to some other cause, but there's been a statistical, there's clearly a relationship between the E. coli and illness in swimmers.
When we backtrack beach closures, are we usually pretty certain about what the source problem was, whether it's pet waste or other waste that's coming down?
There are some techniques to figure that out. You can actually look at the DNA and trace back to see what was the producer of the waste. And there hasn't been a tremendous amount of that kind of work done in Vermont, but there has been some done in Colchester, for example. And what we find is that all mammals produce bacteria in their waste and produce E. coli. Now, one other really important point is that we measure E. coli because it's easy to measure. Many E. coli are strains of E. coli are benign, and many things that we are not measuring can cause sickness. And so we report on this indicator that we can measure easily because we know there are literally hundreds of bacteria and viruses that can be in waste that we are concerned about. So that's an important point and that's why all this range of sicknesses can be associated with pet waste. But anyway, back to your question, birds, for example, will produce bacteria that concern us. So beaches where there are lots and lots of seagulls are problems because they're producing waste right in the water there. So you want to go to the beach and feed bread to the birds. That's not a good idea. Or thinking about your dock and does it attract birds? That's something to be concerned about. Certainly other animals that live in the forest produce that bacteria as well. But in urban areas, the predominant animals tend to be our pets, and that's why we're so focused on our pets, because they're producing a large percentage of what we think is in the water.
Back to your original point, too, about Chittenden County. Not everybody in Chittenden County is serviced by a municipal water system. Mm-hmm. Many homes are on wells, and many homes have leach fields. Some have a combination of municipal water and a leach field. And we were talking about pet waste, and if you aren't monitoring, if you are on a well, and it's a shallow well or a spring, and yours pet or somebody else's pet is using that area to do its duty, that could be a problem as well. So it's not just the surface waters, it can become an issue within your individual water system if you don't control the source of the waste.
Well said, and I guess that's the point, is to spend so much time on the issue of the pet and pet management is important because it's such a common area to our lives. And again, changing behavior becomes so difficult when you're just used to a certain routine. You get up at a certain time, you have your routine, and we need to be very alert to exactly how we're affecting our little plot of land and how that translates into the entire community. Anything else? We're going to talk about some other issues in terms of our own behaviors and how we can control it at home. But any other issues surrounding pets, like either a well or anything else that you think is important to get across at this point?
Just a final thought that some people say, well, you can't conclusively say that it's dog waste that's causing beach closures. But there's enough causal evidence, and there are enough other good reasons to keep pet waste out of a storm drain system that wasn't designed to handle it, to really ask people to be vigilant about this. And all of the municipalities and the university and the state are aware that there are other bacterial sources, and we're addressing those through other aspects of stormwater management.
And if people missed it at the top of the show or in the background video that we showed, a lot of people may have this thought that the water goes somewhere and is treated before it gets out to the lake, and it isn't. It goes down, through, and out. And that's why it's so important that we can control it at our own level. Let's talk about something else that's pretty common, and that's washing our cars. A lot of people in the viewing area wash their cars at home, and that can create some issues. Julie Beth, you want to tackle that one right off the top as to how we can do a better job there?
The issue with car washing is that, again, if you're washing your car on a paved surface that leads to a storm drain, everything that you use to wash your car, plus that slug of water, is heading right into the storm drain that, again, wasn't designed to handle it. Stormwater systems, even if there's a pond at the end of your development, were not intended to clean out turtle wax. When we can wash our cars either on the grass, where again the magic of soil microbes will help remove those pollutants, or take it to a car wash that's connected to a sanitary wastewater system, we can keep a lot of stuff out of the stormwater system in our surface waters that wasn't supposed to be there. So finding a grassed area either in your yard, or some condo associations have an area that's designated for car washing that's on the grass, that's an excellent solution that we really, really encourage.
What about for some of the viewers who may not have a paved driveway but might have a gravel driveway or something like that? Is that an issue?
Gravel driveway is essentially the same as a paved driveway. Once you've driven over a lawn area several times, you get compaction, which results in hardening of the surface and runoff. So not only do you have the hard surface, but if you overload it with water, you also wash some of those microbes and the silt and sediment back out into the public right-of-way or into these storm drain systems. So you want to take care not to overdrive on a lawn and compact, but if you're doing just a maintenance activity, that's okay, because the grass will maintain its vitality. It'll be able to treat that wastewater that comes off of the car washing, and everything will be fine.
And let's roll back a little bit too to the issue that we were talking about before with the pet waste. If we do a good job of keeping the wastewater from running off, great, but what about washing your car near your well or something like that? Is that a concern as well?
I would say it would be, because you don't want to wash in and have anything that you're washing drop into your drinking water supply. And if you have a small fuel leak or an oil leak that can't be bound by the soil, oil is one of those amazing substances that spreads very quickly and very broadly. And maybe you have some more facts and figures on that, but it can spread down to 1 molecule thick, so it goes a long way. So you want to avoid your wells, and again, it carries into waterways that way as well, so you want to make sure that if you have oil leaks in your cars, fix them, because it certainly does protect the environment and reduce the potential damage to your vehicle, but also take care of, again, if it's washing off, if you are washing it near a well, you could potentially draw it into your own drinking water system at home, and that's not a good thing.
Well, it's definitely not a good thing. And the other thing to keep in mind, if you live in an area where you're not on municipal water, is, we don't still understand all of the groundwater connections. So you think you're away from the area that feeds your well. You may or may not be right, but you also may be feeding your neighbor's well. So you have to be very, very careful if you're using well water.
And I would think some of our handier viewers to this program may be changing their own oil or doing some maintenance on their autos at home. Again, another issue. What are some of the tips that we can offer today that can help people do a better job there?
Well, there are local hazardous waste depots in the county where you can take your used oil. There's quite a number of places where you can take used oil now. A lot of gas stations will take it at no charge. Some of the filters and things like that can also be recycled. Antifreeze, those types of fluids should be captured, and then the best thing would be to contact your hazardous waste rover or the Chittenden County Solid Waste District and find out what the most current or available service is for handling those wastes. But you certainly don't want them to drip out or leak out or pour out onto the ground as you're repairing a hose or a pipe or what. So
as you mentioned, capture is a key component to that, making sure that you've got something capturing it, but also probably something underneath that to make sure there isn't any kind of overspill.
The driveway liners that are available from a lot of our auto parts dealers are very, very important. If you can do your home car repair on top of one of the liners that they sell, so that the stray oil, the stray fuel, the stray fluids don't end up sitting on the pavement and waiting for that next rainstorm to end up in the storm drains, that's a great service you can do for your neighborhood and keeps your driveway cleaner too.
Right, and just to go back to places that you can take your used oil, the Solid Waste District has ongoing service that you can take and dump your oil.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's the rover, I believe, is what is working in Chittenden County. There are some central depositories, and I think downtown Burlington has one. But the best thing would be to look at the Chittenden County Solid Waste District, find out from them where the current services are provided. Something like kitty litter is also just a simple absorbent type of material that when you do have a spill, if you spread it on there, you do capture it in large part, and then you can deposit that in the trash.
You also need to think about your lawnmowers as well, because cars are not the only thing that use oil and use gas. And you fill up your lawnmower on the driveway and you spill, you have the same kind of problem. The next rainfall will carry that away. So you need to be careful about those activities as well. Put something underneath if you think there's going to be a problem.
You raise a good point because, again, a lot of folks might be not only doing the lawn, but you've got your weed eaters and your chainsaws and people doing just general maintenance around the house. And as we talk about year-round, spring, summer, winter, and fall, people might be scraping their house down and getting ready to paint, spruce it up. What are some of the tips that we can give people in terms of that activity and making sure that we can limit the impact from house maintenance, scraping it down?
Well, for sure, when you scrape or pressure wash a house, you want to make sure you have something that'll capture all the paint chips that drop off. It's been decades since paint had a lead base to it, but lead can be extremely toxic at very low levels. So you want to capture those waste materials. And again, you can get in touch with the solid waste district for advice on how to dispose of it. But the ideal thing is, rather than trying to pick it all up after, prepare for it in advance. And what it does is speed your cleanup, protects your own lawn, the exposure to your family, and also makes it easier to do the job as quickly as possible and clean up as best we can to protect the environment.
Any other tips in terms of thinking about once you've scraped it down, then you've got the paint job? Actually, I always found the painting part was a little more fun than the scraping part, but still, we have to take care of business with the paint too. What tips do we have in terms of the paint itself?
That's the same principle. Don't put it in the storm drain. We can certainly, using anything absorbent to clean it up and then get that absorbent material into the trash is the appropriate thing to do. If you have a third of a can of paint left over at the end, you can certainly take that up to the Solid Waste District's Hazardous Materials Center, and they're turning it into recycled paint that's available for purchase. So again, it's the same thing. If you wouldn't want your kid to end up coming into contact with it, or you wouldn't want to come into contact with it, don't get it into the storm drain. The hazardous waste drop-off will take that extra paint from you. And again, just make sure that those rags and things end up not hanging around waiting to get rained on, but end up in your trash can properly disposed of.
What about cleanup? Is it okay to clean your brushes in your sink? Talk about a water-based latex paint, and also what about oil-based paints? What about cleanup? How can we do that better?
Cleanup of latex paints in a sink is very good. When you're dealing with cleanup of an oil-based paint, again, it keeps tying back to reduce, reuse, recycle. Only don't do a bunch of small brushings. You want to set up to paint everything you can all at one time. And when you have to clean up, you don't always have to clean up when you take a break. You can wrap your paintbrush in a plastic bag and it'll hold for a couple of days. It makes it a lot easier, then you can continue on with your work. But if you have an oil-based paint and you need to clean it up, you can use a paint thinner, clean that brush, and then set that material aside and let it settle back out, and then reuse it for a first clean later on. It's not crystal clear, but it does a very good job once you've washed the paint solids out. And ultimately, when that material is ready for disposal, again, the Solid Waste District can help coordinate that removal and disposal of that for us as part of their function. As far as the latex paints, the best place for that is to brush it out, get your brush as dry as possible, then wash it with soap and water in a sink. Let it go to the wastewater facility if you're tied up, if you're connected to a facility. But if you do a good job brushing that paint out, you can also rinse the brush out in a septic system if you need to. You just want to put as little as water with the paint in there as you can.
And speaking about the leftover paint too, there are other ideas. Not just taking it back on the days that the Solid Waste District might have, paint gathering and collection, but you might be able to donate it.
And again, the Solid Waste District is the place I go to get that coordinated, but you can also donate it. There are daycare centers that every now and then will have a painting project, and so other volunteer agencies may need it. My first place to start, so I don't have to make too many phone calls, has been with the solid waste district, just knowing that that paint is going to an appropriate location and getting reused. Again, it just does not belong in our storm drain system.
I just want to bring Jim Pease back in for a moment here. In terms of looking at the state and looking at the viewing area that we're talking about right now, are there areas that the state identifies as having a little bit more of an issue in terms of the storm water and the integrity of that water?
Well, the rule follows from the census data, as we talked about, but it also is defined by where the stormwater infrastructure is in the state. I mean, that is really what we're regulating. It's what is called the MS4, the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. So those systems are scattered across the state, but they're obviously much more elaborate in the more urban areas, and in Burlington and out to almost Jericho and north to Milton and down to Shelburne. That is the drainage that we focus on in terms of this permit, because that's where the pipe system is, and as we've talked about all through this, is that pipe system has no treatment typically at the end of it, and it's a straight discharge to our waters. So that's why the Clean Water Act is focused on the municipal separate storm sewer system.
Okay, and erosion. How is erosion an issue in this? You might not connect the two, but what's the important points to get across in terms of erosion?
Well, erosion, it means that there's so much water flowing so fast that it's picking up the soil and taking it with it. And that soil clogs up the storm drain network. There are storm drain systems are designed to handle sediment, but only so much sediment. One of the things to think about is when you look at your favorite backyard stream, and you want it to be healthy, you want it to be this beautiful place that you can look at. When its banks are sort of crumbling down into the stream, and there's a pile of sediment, or sand downstream, something's not quite right in that stream. And the shape that the channel has reflects the delivery of water and sediment over time. And when we have some of these streams that get lots and lots and lots of stormwater, they simply can't cope with all of that water delivered to it so quickly. And so we want to reduce the power of the water so it doesn't go in one big slug that erodes the bank. And the ways that you can contribute to that is to let the water run into your lawn. So if you have a gutter coming down from your roof, don't put one of those shields and funnel it directly to the curb into the storm drain. Let it go out onto your grass so it has a chance to soak in. Anything that we can do to let the rainwater soak down into the ground, get into the groundwater, and then gradually go back to the stream is going to really help the situation a lot.
Well, that brings up the point then. You mentioned gutters. There are other things around our house that we may not think about that can affect this issue.
Right.
I know, I'd hate to have you over at my house right now because I think there's a few leaves in the gutter. But what can we do? What's important around the house?
Well, you need to clean those gutters out. Get up on that ladder. Be careful about it, but
right.
keep those gutters clean. And then look at where your downspout is going, and try and get your downspout to spread out and go, into a garden. Mine, the one in the front, goes into the back of my garden, or goes out onto your lawn. So the water is flowing out and has a chance to soak into the ground instead of going right down to the curb and into the storm drain system. Rain barrels are something that's become very popular on the West Coast. They're a little bit rarer here, but to collect your water in a rain barrel when it comes down, if you have not a convenient place to capture your water, and let it slowly drain onto the grass from the rain barrel, or use that water to water your garden and that kind of thing.
This is an area that the impact of each individual house on how much water gets forced into the system too quickly in a storm event cumulatively has had perhaps the biggest impact on our streams in Chittenden County. And a plug for rain barrels, the city's been giving them away in a partnership project with UVM to have people help start to reduce that impact. If you have a place around your yard where you need a water source, if your spigot's way too far away and you're always dragging the extender hose around, think about putting some of your gutter rainwater into a rain barrel. It helps the streams, and it can help you with around the house. And the more each of us gets into the habit of thinking about how the water leaves our property and how water behaves when it hits our property, the better off we'll be on a county basis. Because those individual pieces of rooftop and pavement and gutters and drainage changes are really causing the streams to have problems.
You know, and again, as we look throughout the seasons and we get into various times where construction activity around the house might be a little bit heavier, what should we look for in terms of that activity as we improve our houses or are actually building?
The ideal thing would be to make sure that there is no discharge off of your property as you're doing this work. And you can easily accomplish that by covering dirt piles or setting the pile in a low-lying area. That way, whatever rain or water does hit, it isn't going to wash it out. If you're piling it there, it's because you want to use it again somehow to backfill or whatever. When it comes to if you're having a large pour with a concrete truck, let them wash out on the site. Don't wash out at the curb, as that used to be the standard. Most of the contractors are very good about that now. We've been working with general contractors to understand that a lot of the practices that used to be common are no longer acceptable, and we're just trying to educate everybody as to the potential harm to the environment. And if you can keep it on the site and use it and do the cleanup at that point, or contact your local public works department. Some communities actually do have an area where they may be able to wash out. We can all do a little bit of extra reduction of the pollution load on those systems.
I would imagine it might be a little bit intimidating for some people if they're working with their contractor to actually point these things out, but it's a great idea if they've seen this show or they've gotten some information from RCEP to talk about better management of a construction site. You know, a lot of people are going to be improving their houses. They should feel brave at that point and say, hey, did you ever think of covering that pile over there? Also, going back to just general behavior patterns that, again, people may have not thought about or missed as we've talked through the show. Hosing down the driveway. You know, people, you don't think about it. You think you're cleaning your driveway and you're making the place presentable, but that very activity could be detrimental. What?
Right. Don't do it. I mean, the storm drains are for storms. They're to collect the rainwater. Get the broom out, you know. It's the old-fashioned way, but that's the better way. Get the broom out and sweep it up.
And sweep it to the sides, right? Not down.
Right.
Don't sweep it to the storm drain. That's
you
correct.
got to be thinking like, okay, that storm drain's down there. We're going to sweep it to the sides. And also, what about like leaf blowers and things like that as we get into the autumn? Do those have an effect? Or?
They do have an effect, especially if you blow everything to the curb expecting somebody else to take care of it. Part of the job is following it through to the end, and that means piling it up, taking it, and either composting it, using it as bedding on site, or taking it to the local drop-off center where they will mix it with other yard waste and create a compost.
We've had issues in South Burlington where people really believe that they're doing the right thing by creating a leaf and brush pile right on top of a stream. And again, that's just creating a nutrient base that ends up leaching or washing into the streams. Yard waste needs to be composted away from surface waters, where again, the soil microbes are going to be able to handle that, or better yet, take it up to the solid waste district where they turn it into compost that we can reuse regionally.
Now, some people may not like this aesthetic suggestion that I'm about to make here, but why not when you're cutting your lawn too? Just let it compost into the lawn. They actually have some lawnmowers that have that effect where they, it just keeps, instead of blowing out to the side or into a bag, it actually kind of mulches a bit into the lawn, which is good.
Right. It also produces some basic fertilizer and organic matter for the lawn itself.
Right, which would reduce the
It's a great way to recycle.
Yeah. Jim Pease, as we look out into the future, I was noticing on the website, and we should mention the website, if you want any information about what we're talking about today, or you want to send somebody else there that could benefit by the information, www.smartwaterways.org, and that's smartwaterways.org. Go there. There's a lot of information there. I want to go back over to Jim. There are areas identified throughout the state where there are programs over time trying to build the stormwater system so that it's stronger and less affected. Can you talk a bit about what's happening at the state level as we look out to 2007, 2008, 2010 in different areas around the state?
Around the state, there's about 17 watersheds that are considered impaired, do not meet the water quality standards, and because of stormwater. Most of those are in the urban areas, but some are in the ski area watersheds. The state is developing a watershed plan for these watersheds, but regardless of what the state does in terms of regulatory schemes, there's probably no way that you could ever, and you probably wouldn't want to regulate individual behavior. So that's why this education program is so important, because the threshold for state regulatory requirements would be a development, building a development. That will never get to the individual homeowner that's mowing his lawn or cleaning his gutters or washing his car. That's why we need this education program to address that missing component. But the state is developing a plan for each of these individual watersheds that will be implemented in the next three to 4 years, with the goal of restoring the waters back to the Class B water quality standard.
We just have very few moments left in the program, so what I'd like to do is actually go right around the table and throw out an area that people can take a look at, and you come up with your favorite tip. And so, Jim, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to start with the management of your auto. What do you think is the best tip you can give people, just to remind them as a recap, in terms of auto maintenance, washing your car, oil changes?
Yeah, I mean, cars are notoriously toxic if you think about it. There's just about any metal and any compound in them that could potentially leach out, and keeping an eye on leaks, keeping an eye on your repairs so that your car is maintained. I think it's inevitable that there's going to be pollution, but if we can minimize that, that's the goal.
Capture that oil and take it to the solid waste district. Julie Beth, pets. Pets. What can we do? Quick couple of high point tips.
Keep a good supply of plastic grocery bags. Bag it, even if it's a really hot day and it's really stinky. Bag it up, get it into the trash.
And Dr. Mary Watson, erosion. Things that we can do to help not have a big flush of material or water going down.
Slow down your water. Instead of thinking the fastest way to get it off your property, think about the slowest way you can get it off your property. So, send it to your grass, send it to your garden, slow it down, and gradually release it from your property.
And Jim Jutras, I'm gonna put you on the fertilizing detail. We're making our lawns look good. What can we do to do better there?
In a lot of ways, we're told we need to fertilize. Find out if you need to fertilize first before you apply the fertilizer. So test your soils. It's very easy to do, very inexpensive, and costs less than the fertilizer does.
And keep it on the grass.
Yes.
Not on the driveway. Well, that's our program. After the storm, stormwater in Vermont, it's much more than just that word stormwater. It's things that we can do at home, all very logical, but also thinking about what we do in our space affects everybody around us, and it affects the entire community. I want to thank our panelists today for joining us on the show. Jim Pease from the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, also Jim Jutras from the Village of Essex Junction. Sitting next to Jim, we have Dr. Mary Watson from the University of Vermont's Rubenstein Ecosystem Science Laboratory. And from South Burlington, Julie Beth Hines. I want to thank all of our panelists for taking the time on this program from the Regional Stormwater Education Program, or if you hear it around the street, we call it RSEP. Thank you for joining us, and do your part to keep the stormwater and the water system clean. I'm Rob Mahalik. Thanks for joining us.